do not think I've ever been asked that question or ever really thought about that question.
I believe love played a very big role in my attempts. The absence of it.
I don't want to be very old and hate myself.
Love is an organizing force. I feel that love is synonymous with resilience.
Hey there, my name is Sharon, and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, millions of people try to take their own lives, and we almost never talk about it. We certainly don't talk about it enough, and when we do talk about it and hear about it, well, far too many of us, we're just not very good at it. So one of my goals with this podcast is to have more conversations, and hopefully better conversations with attempt survivors, in large part to help more people in more places hopefully feel a little less shitty and a little less alone. Now, if you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to talk, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, including our membership, the Noted Network podcast training, how to leave us an audio message, all of that is in the show notes, so check it out if you want to learn more. Finally, we are talking about suicide on this podcast. My guests and I don't typically hold back, so please take that into account before you listen or as you listen. But I do hope you listen because there's so much to learn. Today is a special episode, and we are having a conversation on the intimate intersection of suicide, love, and survival. Part 1. Stay tuned in the next couple of days for Part 2. And my guests, in order, are Sharon in Ontario, Ambient in Alberta, Sofia in California, and Elizabeth in Washington. And as always, I would love your thoughts, your ideas, your feedback, your questions. Do not hesitate to reach out by email or social media. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to jump right in. Sharon, what role, Sharon, in Thunder Bay did love or the absence of it play while you were in the thick of it?
That is a really good question. And I do not think I've ever been asked that question or ever really thought about that question. Different counselors and therapists and group therapies on, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. No, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. I really don't.
I think it's an interesting question.
And I am ancient and archaic and born in 1968. So I've been through a few different incarnations of therapy since I was probably 16. So what role did love in any of its forms or the absence of it? Well, I would say the absence of it contributed to my ideation and my planning and attempts. The absence of it, absolutely, 1,000,000,000%, or the perception that there was none. Because sometimes you can get into a mental state where you can't feel it. You just don't feel it. You're so shut down that you don't feel love, even if there is actually love occurring.
But if you don't feel it, then can we argue it isn't there?
Yeah, I would say. So I would say, like, playing in my attempt and my ideation and my chronic ideation, I think the absence of it played more of a part when I was younger and less kind of recovered, because the younger you are, the more sort of, I don't know if it's unrealistic about life, the reality of life. And I think also for me, I didn't love myself. I hated myself, loathed, despised, wanted to erase myself from the planet. So the absence of love for myself also played a huge part. So it's the absence of love of people in your sort of circle and the absence of love for myself.
How does the lack of love, and I'm saying lack of love meaning because that's what you felt, and I think that's what matters. How is that a factor in you ideating and or attempting?
If you don't feel love, and also if you don't love anything about your life, you don't love anything about your life, you don't love yourself, you don't love your circumstances, you're not feeling love and you don't love anything in return either. So what's the point? What's the point of life if there's no love?
That's a good question, Sharon. For the moment, question number 2, what role does it play whenever it is? It could be past, it could be present in terms of you in your survival.
Well, for me, the first thing that kept me on the planet was love for my daughter, and the responsibility in the sense that I didn't want to leave the legacy of my self-exit on her and give her a greater chance of doing the same thing. So that kept me going for a while, not in a good way, but it kept me from completing. So I would say love for her and the responsibility to her, and then the subsequent grandchildren. But now, actually, now that I'm more in sort of recovery and evolving, and I'm finding a lot of unconditional love with other people that are kind of in recovery. And that is really helping me stay on the planet. Giving and receiving unconditional love keeps me on the planet.
What does that look like?
Well, I think I could always, because I was in a bunch of 12-step, like ACOA, Al-Anon, all the 12 steps. And I found I could forgive everybody I could understand, empathize, forgive other people pretty unconditionally, but I could never forgive myself. I had this big, huge, high standard that if I wasn't perfect, I was useless. I was pointless. And if I didn't have a purpose and I wasn't being productive, there's no point. Like, who are you? Why are you even on this planet? And once I kind of slowly worked on that, and that isn't no longer my, what are your goals in life? Is like, oh, I want to be productive and I need a purpose. And that's not what it is for me anymore. It's changed. And that's really helped. And that's like being kind, being hopeful, not so much hopeful. I don't go into the hope too much because there's that's a tricky one. No, hope. That's a hard one. I'm really curious to hear what other people have to say, because I've honestly never thought about this question. So I think this is genius, and I do want to hear what other people have to say about this.
Me too. You made this transition real smooth. Ambient in Alberta. What role did love or the absence of it play in your attempt or attempts?
I believe love played a very big role in my attempts, the absence of it. And I think a lot about my expectation about what love should be. I don't think back then I really knew what love is compared to how I view it now. So I think that's an important distinction to make. But it was just the utter absence of love. And then ultimately the absence of self-love, I would say, is what was kind of the final straw in both situations.
If I were to ask any of you, like, why did you attempt? It's a hard question. I try to ask it sometimes on the podcast. It can be a tricky one. If you had felt love, and perhaps that would overlap with self-love, we don't know for sure, would that have potentially been enough for you not to try? Just that. And I don't mean just as in I'm minimizing it.
I think so. I think my perspective on love has shifted in more recent years. I still don't feel it, but I'm able to recognize it coming from other people and recognize that they're loving in the way they know how to. So although there's still an absence in the feeling domain, I think it's important that I can see people are expressing love. So it shifts a little bit because you can still recognize that they value you in some way. And that's a shift I actually didn't consider until this moment. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. So tell me, Ambient, like, what does it look like? I know love can be this amorphous, almost abstract idea, but sort of if I were to ask, like, love in action, what does it look like or sound like or feel like?
For me, I think it's a feeling of acceptance or the ability to be vulnerable. And it was like a very simple example. I recently had an emotional situation happen, and I don't vent a lot or express emotion a lot, but I sat with a friend, and in that space, she allowed me to just kind of offload that. So I wouldn't say she loves me, but in that moment, that vulnerability and that sharing of space kind of felt like love, I suppose.
An act of love.
Yeah.
Listening as a radical act of love.
Absolutely.
Listening has got to be in quotation marks, though, or italicized or something. It can't just be. Got to let people know. It's not the same as what you think.
Yeah. Each day that I'm still here is an unexpected one. So that gives you an idea. But I think it's my love for other people that plays the biggest role in me staying. And it's a battle between that feeling and the absence of love from others and for myself. So, depending on the day, it's a constant juggle which one of those forces is stronger. But I think my love for others, despite it not being reciprocal, is probably the biggest factor.
Thanks for sharing that, Ambient. And Sharon.
I completely agree with Ambient and relate because like when I take training on helping people with suicidal ideation and there's all these different mental health training, it gets into all these like really intense details and steps and warnings and like one of the reasons why I like the podcast so much is you just fucking listen. Just fucking listen. When I'm able to just talk to a close friend or someone that has no stake in the game, they're just sitting there, they're just chilling, they're just listening.
Right.
If I can get into a space where I can actually talk about really what's going on inside my head and my heart, and they just sit and they just listen and they just accept, that is absolutely a form of love. That I never really thought about that, but it is absolutely a form of love. And the other thing that popped into my head was helpful suggestions are always actually like criticisms. If you haven't asked for help, if you haven't asked for somebody to like give you suggestions about what to do, when somebody automatically knee-jerk starts telling you advice, that is actually passive aggressive criticism, whether or not people do it intentionally, which I don't think they do it intentionally. And your brain actually takes it in that way as criticism that you're doing something wrong. So if someone can just sit and listen, which has happened to me quite a bit lately, that's absolutely an act of love. Sit and be like this like space that just like flows your dialogue or your bullshit or whatever you need to talk about. This is an amazing conversation. I can't even take it.
You can totally take it. And thanks for taking it. Let me move from Canada to the west coast of the United States. Sofia, in California, the question, and there are two, how did love or the absence of it contribute to your suicide attempt, near attempt, and or attempts? And then the second part is how is it, if at all, played a role in you staying alive?
To clarify, I have never attempted suicide.
You were on the podcast, and so it
Yeah.
might be helpful for our listeners, given what you just shared, to say why you were on the podcast.
I talked to you because I wanted to talk about like suicidality, and I like the way that you do it. Yeah, for the past like almost 3 years now, I've thought about suicide like every day. I have thought about it like before in my life. I think I do hate myself, at least a little bit, and that contributes to thinking about ending my life and like wanting to die. Though I wouldn't say that self-hatred is exactly lack of self-love. Because I think truly lack of love is ambivalence. And that I can kind of maybe see a little bit too. But like hatred is like the other way.
So when you think about that question in terms of how it might have played a role in your, I think at least in your case, ideating regularly for a long time, it is you're thinking most about lack of self-love.
Yeah, I think lack of self-love, and then also we throw self-hatred into the mix. Nowadays, I think about it as like, yeah, if I don't love myself, and in fact I hate myself, that's probably going to be reflected in my behavior. I find it tedious and like I'm not very motivated to take care of myself. I do things now to take care of myself because I can logically see that it's right, it's useful. And if I really don't take care of myself, then I will end up dependent on other people and I will no longer be self-sufficient, which is something that I don't want to do. I think also like my lack of love for myself, like not liking myself, kind of prevents me from being motivated or like wanting to form deeper, more lasting connections with other people. Even if I would really like someone's company, in some cases, I talk myself out of trying to talk to them or like ask them if they want to spend time because I'm like, why would they want to spend time with me? Other than what they specifically suggest or agree to. And that's not the kind of life I want to live. I don't want to be very old and hate myself and, either be totally alone because like I will not have made a very committed or meaningful relationship with another person, or in fact, be dependent on someone else or have people dependent on me who then have felt the effects of my self-hatred over the years. Like,
what keeps you alive?
At this point, trying to figure out a way I can leave gracefully. I'm kind of inclined to say when I end my life because I feel pretty strongly about that. But yeah, like if I end my life, I want to leave in kind of the best way I can.
So it's interesting that I think there was a presupposition that love is what keeps people around, or one protective factor, right? But you're saying, if I understand correctly, that your main reason for staying is figuring out a way to not stay and do it in a way where it's okay for you and others.
Yes. I could argue that it's partly out of love. I don't want to cause unnecessary suffering, I guess, to the people who I love and who love me.
And that reminds me of something that comes up all the time in the podcast, which is the idea of selfishness or not selfishness with respect to suicide. Question: can taking one's own life be an act of love? Or in your case, the way in which prepares to take their own life?
I don't know about like the act itself, but the way that someone goes about it and the way that maybe other people might be involved can manifest love or sort of show that there is love and there is compassion. Like the ideal situation would be that I can talk about my thoughts and feelings openly with the people who I love. And I'm like, I don't want to wait till natural or accidental death. That's not what I want. I'm thinking about making this decision for my own life, right? And try and give those people who I care about some kind of a sense of closure. That is like that desire, I think, comes out of love.
There's not a small number of people I talked to for the podcast who, at the time in which they were considering or attempting, it was purely out of love for someone else in their life. If I am gone, they will be better, period. Doesn't matter if it's true. That's how they felt. Elizabeth in Washington, also West Coast. How did love or the absence of it contribute, if at all, to your suicide attempt?
The answer to that question is a very clear, as I did express in my episode on Suicide Noted, was motivated 100% out of my experience, my conception of love for my daughter. As a parent, you actually are making decisions for your child on a daily basis. Like, she was only at that time 8 years old. And from the ages of 5 until 9, so I guess she was about 8.5, she was exhibiting more and more, despite my every effort, every scaffolding of everything I had in place to try to give her a better life than my own. She was exhibiting extreme symptoms of PTSD. As a single mom, I took full responsibility for that. I was like, I am clearly causing her more harm than good, despite all of my efforts at path correction, therapy, everything that I could possibly be doing to improve my own condition and my own self. It seemed that despite all of that, I was causing her to be very dysfunctional. I mean, she was like regressing in her developmental stages instead of progressing. And I just assumed I was the cause. But I also, right around that very same time, came to learn, sadly, I don't know if you call it coincidental, ironic, all the above, but had been going through for years being sexually abused by somebody I trusted. So that was the cause of why she was exhibiting those symptoms. When I found that out, then everything changed and all of my energy went into, I guess, being who I thought I wish would have been there for me.
And that was about, 9-10 years ago, if I remember correctly from our conversation? So what's kept you alive, and how has love, if at all, played a part in that?
I don't know. I really don't. That's why, I start getting all philosophical about what love is. I can speak for myself, and I think probably anyone who's experienced suicidal ideation, we change our minds and we change the way we feel about something. We change the way the way that we're perceiving something. I know when I feel what I perceive to be love. There have been times that I have felt something that felt like love at one moment, but at other times it didn't. So like, for example, I actually feel love when people give me suggestions and advice. Like if I'm talking about something that I'm struggling with, I really believe that almost everything has a solution. And I'm very curious and I'm always working to try to figure shit out and solve problems. And I feel so loved when I can have dialogue and interact. And yes, of course, sometimes I want someone to just shut the fuck up and listen to me. I don't like to be interrupted. I don't like to be, but I do want people to hear what I'm saying. And then I feel loved if they give me suggestions. I might roll my eyes because it's like, of course I fucking know that. But at least I feel like you care.
And I think I'm gauging that the way you're interpreting that question, you're saying either it hasn't or I don't know.
I think it's everything. I really do. I think love is an organizing force. I feel that love is synonymous with resilience. Love is this thing that it like mends, it binds, it communicates, it builds, it reinforces, it restructures, it can change, but it can break down and then it comes back. It's like, it's resilience. It is resilience. So that's the only reason I'm here is because there's some force, whether it's the perceived felt experience of it changes all the time. Sometimes my perceived sense of what love is just coming from walking outside and just feeling and seeing nature. It's a huge part. It is everything. Obviously, love for my daughter, love for my husband. I'm cultivating love for myself, but I fucking hate myself.
Something you said that I want to respond to with respect to love in action. What works for you, like love in action for you, is sometimes somebody like listening and offering some ideas. For other people, it's not the case. So in action, it's very different. It's personal. And what that requires is communicating, right? That requires somebody asking a question. That requires somebody saying, I don't know, but maybe what will help you. And what you would say, Elizabeth, is probably different than what I would say. If you're saying, for example, that like in a particular situation, a suggestion might help, I'm pretty much not that guy, right? But so that's okay. So now we know.
I can discern the difference for myself, what feels like a caring, thoughtful suggestion. Even if it's something I already know and I've already tried, I even might get irritated by it or roll my eyes because I'm like, you don't think I fucking tried that? But I can feel they're saying it because they care. That matters to me. You can just tell the difference. It's the affect that's there. That's the love.
I could not agree more. 100%. Before I say goodbye, I wanted to share with the listeners something interesting that happened in the 48 hours or so after I spoke with these 4 women. I was curious and I asked them what they thought of the conversation, perhaps reflect on the conversation. Sharon in Thunder Bay said she wants to come back for part 2, and she did, and that part 2 will be out soon. Elizabeth said she wrote for a long time, several pages in a journal about love and suicide, survival and resilience. And Ambient shared with me some things that I want to share with you. She, of course, gave me permission. She wrote that I had this additional perspective literally the moment I left the meeting yesterday. When you first asked the question, immediately I needed to know, well, what is love anyway? I would answer that with it holds many meanings simultaneously and can be fluid. We all know there's family love, romantic love, love for your children. Recognizing that, I would say the easiest way to generalize the concept of love for me is that it is honest, kindness, and respect. And actually a big thing I'm grappling with, and this is her speaking, is the declining amount of love amongst humans in the broader context of society. This plays into my ideation a huge amount. Pain plays a bigger part, but if there is no love, then fighting through pain feels even more arduous and futile. most people probably wouldn't call what I'm talking about as love. I've referred to it before as humanity, because it is so difficult to define love as it intersects so many domains. I would argue, in the broadest context, love is kindness and respect. Ultimately, that shows a basic care for another's well-being. The very evident decline of that in our Western society is widely disturbing and sad. Thank you again for this conversation and what you shared after. And of course, to everybody who listens, thank you. Appreciate your interest and your support. If you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to talk, please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com. As always, you can check the show notes to learn more about the podcast, including our membership, the Noted Network, among other things. And stay tuned tomorrow for the second part of this conversation with some other folks and past guests on the intimate intersection of love, suicide, and survival. And that is all for episode number 257. Stay strong. Do the best you can. I'll talk to you soon.